it's not. It's telling me things that aren't true. That's the way it goes. Okay. So the teshuvah the teshuvah that we do, we can't reach through our teshuvah the level of kapara that we are granted. Hamachlekes bein Rebbe v'Rabbanan he. What's the machlekes? Kate said Yecholim. How are we able lagia to reach ela kapara shel itzuma shel yom, to reach that level of kapara called itzuma shel yom? Meaning, and we'll see, Yom Kippur brings about a complete and total cleansing of the Jew. After you walk out of the day of Yom Kippur, which is a very exciting thing, you are naki, you are clean. Okay, so that's not simply a result of the teshuvah that you and I did, because you and I can do teshuvah any day and do not necessarily walk out of that day in the same state as we walk out of Yom Kippur. Ad kedei kach are we in a state of spiritual cleanliness after Yom Kippur, that there was a Tana who used to bring, an early Tana who used to bring a korban asham talui every single day. He'd bring a korban that is, it's called an asham talui. It's a korban that in case he did something wrong, it's an asham talui. You're not sure whether or not you transgressed a particular avera, so you bring a korban called the asham talui. It's hanging. It's dependent on whether or not you did the avera or not. Right? If it isn't, then it's Stama Nadava. It's a gift to the Beis Hamikdash, gift to the Eibishter. Okay. He used to bring one every single day. Also to bring an Asham Talui on Motzei Yom Kippur. Can't bring it on Yud Aleph Teshuvah. Why not? Naki. There's nothing to
Motzei Yom Kippur or the next day?
The next day. You don't bring korbanos at night. The next day. Right? You're going to ask, well, maybe he did an avera. Learn what the halacha said. Amazing halacha, right? Yom Kippur brings about a situation that this is someone who brought, not Shabbos, he didn't bring on Shabbos. Every day, you bring a korban asham, not Yud Aleph Teshuvah. So somehow this incredible state of cleanliness attaches to us all. So that's not commensurate to the teshuvah that we do. I mean, I don't want to get into the kishkas of everybody in the room, but I think you're probably pakolto yoter the same as me, right? We're generally pretty similar, us humans walking around, and we don't reach states of such unbelievable spiritual heights such that we've undone everything that might have happened in our life that was not exactly the way it should have been. It's a pretty serious place to reach. And yet we walk out of Yom Kippur as if that's the case, which is pretty astounding. So that the Rebbe is going to ask how that works, right? Rebbe Sever. So what does Rebbe hold? He holds Yom Kippur as mechaper and that the teshuvah is not even necessary. Rebbe Sever, im bei Yom Kippurim, with the coming of the day of Yom Kippur, miyad, immediately, me'ir ha'itzumel shoyim, it shines the itzumel shoyim, essence of the day. Last time I say that. Afilu kisha adam adayin lo yaseh teshuvah, even if a person hasn't yet done teshuvah. Va'itzumel shoyim atzmei mechaper alav inisa, and the itzumel shoyim itself atones for his transgressions. The Rebbe does say in a sicha, you should know, there's a sicha in Purim, where the Rebbe says, why is Yom Kippurim just like Purim, but it's not quite as powerful as Purim? Because Yom Kippurim, we paskin, you have to do teshuvah in order to achieve a certain level of atonement. Yom Purim, you don't even have to do teshuvah. Whatever Purim brings about, it's done without teshuvah. But Yom Kippur is what we're talking about now. Rebbe says you don't have to do teshuvah, Yom Kippur does the job. Now, obviously, we're going to see later in the sicha, but it's rather obvious. You can't break Yom Kippur. You can't eat and do averas on Yom Kippur and have Yom Kippur be mechaper. You have to do Yom Kippur. But lav dafka, the teshuvah has to be complete.
What was avana?
Transgressions. Can you see if you can make that work? See what it says? I don't know. Do you know how to work this?
I have no idea.
No idea. It's just making, no, it's just, it says, orientation is locked, rotate device back, which is not true because I changed the orientation, but whatever.
Well, maybe
I don't know, it just annoys me. Look over that way. That way I don't see it. No, it's bothering me. There. Okay, now I see you and not me with this thing in the middle of my face.
the camera's flipped?
No. What? V'Rabbanan Seivrim shekadei lagia lekapara al itzuma shel yom. The Chachamim hold that what? How do you get in the door? How do you unlock the power of Yom Kippur? Teshuvah. You unlock the power of Yom Kippur by doing teshuvah. Right? But it's the power of Yom Kippur that's bringing about the kapara. First there has to be a avodas teshuvah. Then there's also the kapara of Yitzum Shayim, Shehi Nailis Yeser, which is higher, more powerful, loftier, Mia Kapara, Abal Yedei Tshuva Levad, the kapara that comes as a result of Tshuva alone. And again, that's rather obvious because I can do Tshuva any day. Vakol Meidim, Avalakol Meidim, everybody agrees Shitzum Shayim Mechaper. Rabbanan and Rebbe. Seder, is that clear? The machlekes and how the Rebbe just explained the machlekes. Any questions on that? We're okay? Okay. Al pize gam yuvnu, based on this, it'll also be understood divrei Chazal al pasuk dirshu avai bimatzah. Find the Kadosh Baruch Hu where he can be. Search the Kadosh Baruch Hu where he can be found. Interesting pasuk, right? And what does that pasuk refer to? Everybody knows because that's a pasuk that the people who are saying, we said it on Tzim Gedalia in Slichas, the people who are saying Slichas still say that every day in Slichas. Why? Because that pasuk refers to where can Hashem be found? The 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. That's what the Gemara is about. The Sicha is about to quote the Gemara. That pasuk, Dirshu Hashem Bimatzeh, what's it referring to? Elu Asara Yomim Shebein Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. These are the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Now that itself, of course, and I'm sure you've run into this already, we're already on the Vav Tishrei today, the Rebbe's mother's Yortzeit. That itself seems to be a somewhat difficult phrase to explain. Why? What does it say? These are the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. What's wrong with that? There's only 7 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. There's 10 days including Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So if it said these are the 10 days from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, that would be okay. But it doesn't say that, and we know Chazal is careful about what they say. Say these are the 10 days that are between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. There's only 7 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and we know, in case you haven't heard this, so it's an important thing to say, you probably have heard it 5 times, you'll hear it a 6th time, it's good. Right? That every single day, what power do you have on every single day of the 7 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? Elevate that day of the week. Today's the only Yom Rishon of the Aseret Yemei Teshuvah. What can you do? You can elevate every Yom Rishon of the past year, and you can give incredible koyach to every Yom Rishon of the coming year. Today is a day you can affect Yom Rishon in terms of the past and the future. Very powerful. All 7 days. Right? So the statement is somewhat hard to understand because and that's why the Asara is in interesting font. Right? Midivrei Chazal b'Gemara muvan. From the words of Chazal in the Gemara, it's understood. Ki lamreis, despite the fact shegam yemei Rosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippur, despite the fact that the days of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur nichlolim are included b'Aseret Yemei Teshuvah in the 10 days of Teshuvah, because after all it says elu asara yomim. These are the 10 days, therefore they're included. Mikol mokim, nevertheless, ein ikar in yonim. The essential reality of those days is not misbate expressed bekach in this shem yemei teshuvah, that they're days of teshuvah. In other words, there are days that are specifically and so to speak only days of teshuvah. What? Those are the 7 days in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are days of teshuvah, so therefore we talk about the 10 days. We include them. But in order to show that there's a difference between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur on one hand and the 7 days in the middle, Chazal write this statement in a very interesting way. These are the 10 days that are between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. In other words, the days that are mamish days solely of Teshuvah are the days in between. Then there are 3 other days that are also days of Teshuvah, but also evidently have some other aspect, which we'll see transcends Teshuvah. But they also have an aspect of Teshuvah. They are days of Teshuvah. Therefore, there's 10 days of Teshuvah. The Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, that's what we say. But the ikar expression of those days that are solely days of Teshuvah are the 7 days in between. And that's why Chazal used that interesting language. These are the 10 days between Shebein Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. He kalalusam, their inclusion. Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Baseres Yemei Teshuvah, in the 10 days of Teshuvah, he hadarga hanechusa is a lower level of the expression of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, of those 2 days. V'ilu, whereas in Yonam Ha'atzmi, the essential character of those 2 days, is higher than Teshuvah. Okay, so now we've talked about this before. Right? We saw this in Elul when we were learning Anila Deidi V'Deidi Li. And where's the Rebbe going to take us? So the Rebbe's going to take us to a place where there are 3 different levels of our relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Right? We've seen this. There's the level expressed through mitzvahs, which is the most basic level. Right? And on that level, if you do mitzvahs, you're connected. And if you don't do mitzvahs, you're not connected. On that level. Right? Then there's the level of tshuva, which is higher than that, obviously. Because even if you broke that level of mitzvahs, you can still reconnect, because there's something called tshuva, which is more powerful than the connection based on mitzvahs. Because if it weren't more powerful, then how could it undo the separation that was brought about by the lack of performance of mitzvahs? So it's obviously more powerful, a more powerful expression of our connection. The mushal we brought, even though it's not a complete mushal, because it might be the 3rd level is really closer to this, but it doesn't matter. It's still, it helps, the mushal helps us understand it. If you have a job, so then your only relationship to the boss is doing what the boss wants. We talked about this, right? So as long as you do what the boss wants, you have a connection to the boss, you're an employee in this company, and once you stop doing what the boss wants, so then you're going to get fired, and you have nothing to do with the company anymore. Okay, so that's mitzvahs, right? To the extent that a Jew does mitzvahs, he's connected to the Eibishter. To the extent that he doesn't do mitzvahs, so on that level, he's not connected to the Eibishter. Mitzvah miloshin savta, Hebrew, connection. That's what the word mitzvah means, to connect. And it's the most external, extremely important. Nothing goes without them. But that being said, it's still the most external expression of our relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. There's a deeper level called tshuva. What's tshuva? Tshuva allows you to reconnect, even though you might have lost your job. What does that mean? Well, your father owns the company. So there's a connection you have to the boss that transcends the fact that you simply do what he wants you to do. You have a deeper connection. So even though you blew it on the level of the job, per se, he'll probably let you get your job back. Okay. Because you have a deeper connection. So that's tshuva. And then we said there's the highest level of our connection to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, which even transcends tshuva, and that's what the Rebbe is going to talk about now. That's the connection of the essence of our soul to the essence of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Right? Well, we talked about this. That's why I'm going through it relatively quickly. Well, we talked about it when we were learning in Likutei Sichos. So tshuva is the most basic connection. Mitzvahs are the most basic connection. Tshuva is a higher connection. And then there's a level of connection to the Eibishter that can't possibly be diminished in any way, shape, or form. It's not affected negatively by the lack of mitzvahs, and it's not affected positively by mitzvahs. That's the essential connection of the Yid to the Eibishter. The fact that your etzem and the Eibishter's etzem are one. Your essence and the Eibishter's essence is one. That's the 3rd level, and that level is revealed in this world 3 days a year, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So that's what the Rebbe is about to explain to us, right? So that's why Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are part of the 10 days of Teshuvah, because they are. There are days where Teshuvah is much more accessible than the rest of the year. Search Hashem where he can be found. That's the 10 days from Rosh Hashanah until Yom Kippur. But Chazal point out that there is a difference between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the bookends of these 10 days, and the days in the middle, because the 10 days of Teshuvah, the days that are specifically days of Teshuvah, are between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur have a level that transcends even Teshuvah. And what's that? So the Rebbe is about to explain. Ikaran shel Rosh Hashanah, what's the essence of Rosh Hashanah? Tamlichuni aleichem, make me your king. Make me your king upon you. And that's explained in Rosh Hashanah sichas, dafka the sicha before this sicha in this sefer, Chelek Daled, Rosh Hashanah sicha. The Rebbe explains the inyan of Tamlichuni Aleichem, the fact that the Yidden make the Eibishter king comes dafka from our essential connection to the Eibishter, as we learned also in Basi Lagan and in Ani Ladoidi, the essential connection of the king to his people.
How is it different from Teshuvah when you do Teshuvah, you return to your essential connection with God?
So I do, but there's a disconnect that Teshuvah is helping override. Whereas the essential connection, there was no disconnect whatsoever. It's a higher level of reality. Right? There was never a disconnect. On the level in which Teshuvah operates, it's possible that there has been a disconnect. There is no disconnect on the level of Etzem. Right?
And so it's just revealed on these days? It just like...
What, Etzem? Well, let's see what the Rebbe says. He just said it first time. Let's see how he explains this in the sicha. It's, again, this is really a mimer, but it's printed as a sicha. What's the essence of Yom Kippur? That the essence of the day brings about Kapara. That's why it's called Yom Kippurim, the day of Kapara. It's the name of the day. HaKapara should be Yom Zeh. This Kapara, and this now helps explain the difference between Teshuvah and essence, because Teshuvah, in all fairness, is an Aveda, something I have to do, and therefore it might be limited. Well, it is limited. HaKapara should be Yom Zeh. Hamanikim, that is given out. A manak is like a gift that your company might give you. You worked very hard, so they'll give you a manak, a bonus. Where does the word come from? It comes from when a servant leaves servitude, so he's given a manak, right? The owner of him, once the slave leaves that state, so he's given a manak that he can start life with, a little money in the bank. Right? When a soldier leaves the army, he's given a manak. Right? You don't get one when you leave college. You just get a bill for your loans. But hakapara shebiyem ze hamanikim, that is apportioned milamaila lekol adam, to everybody. She'ena nimdedes, it's not measured lefi avedas teshuvah shelo. It's not commensurate to his teshuvah. A person has to do teshuvah, whatever that means. We'll see what that means. But that teshuvah isn't it doesn't relate directly to the level of kapara that you and I achieve. Yom Kippur is a higher level of cleanliness than the teshuvah would normally bring about. And again, that's intuitive, because after all, if that's not the case, so what do I need Yom Kippur for? I can do teshuvah in the middle of Tevis, there's not a problem. Whatever teshuvah is, and also the Rebbe will explain it to us very, very clearly. He says an amazing thing about what teshuvah means. Okay. What does the Alter Rebbe say in the beginning of the Gerasa teshuvah? What is teshuvah? Aziva sechet, leaving behind the chet. Right? I'm not going to do this anymore. Okay, so what does that mean exactly? We'll see. The Rebbe is going to explain it in a very, very powerful way. Kapara, that word kapara, ein perusha, does not mean rak sha'adam einu nenesh avor chet, that a person isn't punished for the chet. That's clemency, right? Someday every year, what doesn't the American president grant clemency to people at the end of his thing, or maybe once a year, whatever. At some point, he gives clemency to a bunch of people who were in jail, who were going to be in jail, right? Your son's a crook, so before they catch him, you can give him clemency. It's good. It's a good deal being president. Okay, but that's not kapara. There's that aspect in kapara. Obviously, a person's not going to be punished for the aveira that they now have kapara for, but it's not simply clemency. It's not simply the lack of punishment. Ella, but what? Gam shenimchak. It's erased. Minafsha, from his soul. Haravav. Ravav is a word for, it's not such a nice English word, but it means filth, dirt. Vapgam, and the blemish. Shenishav al yedei chet shenasa, that was brought about by virtue of the chet that he did. And aveira affects the neshama very powerfully and very negatively. And how can we cleanse the neshama from the effect of that chet? Well, teshuvah, but most powerfully, Yom Kippur. Yeseder mizum, more than this. Tachlis kapara, the ultimate purpose of the ultimate expression of kapara. Loizu bilvad, not only, the Rebbe says, shaloi neisai, that it doesn't remain reishim mi'avedus. any roshim is a mark, a residue is a better word, right? Something that's engraved and something leaves a roshim, right? Okay? A mark doesn't leave a mark from the Avedas. Elo tachlisa, the ultimate purpose of kapara, shazdeines atzmam, that the wrongdoing themselves nefachim are transformed v'nechshavim kazachias and are considered as merits. Now that's usually attached to tshuva, right? What do Chazal say? Chazal say there's two different levels of tshuva. Tshuva miyira, tshuva miyava. Tshuva miyira is I'm afraid of the punishment, so I do tshuva. I'm going to stop doing this because I'm going to get smashed if I keep doing this. Okay, so that's one level of tshuva. And then there's tshuva miyava. It's not a function of being afraid of the punishment. It's a function of experiencing your love for the Eibishter, and you don't want to do something that will distance yourself from the Eibishter, and you feel badly that you have distanced yourself from the Eibishter, and so you do tshuva, right? Hopefully the reason that the husband doesn't turn up the sound, the volume on whatever he's listening to when his wife asks him not to is not because he's afraid he's going to get hit with a pan. Right? Probably the reason he doesn't do that is because he loves his wife and he cares about her and he cares about their relationship, and so he's not going to turn it up, right? So there's things we do from Ava and there's things we might do from Yira. Okay, so Yira it's not the only expression of Yira in any way, shape, or form, but in the context of Teshuvah, usually Yira is Yira Sa'oinish, fear of the punishment, and Ava is Ava. When we talk about Yira and Ava in terms of the Aveda itself, not so much in terms of Teshuvah, but the Aveda themselves, so then there's different levels of Yira, different levels of Ava, and the highest level is ultimately Yira, not Ava. It's Yira, Ava, Yira, 4 different levels. But that's not our discussion right now. But when we talk about Yira relative to Teshuvah, we're usually talking about Yira Sa'inish, the fear of the punishment. And what happens if a person does Teshuvah? That's good. I mean, if a person does Teshuvah because he's afraid of the punishment, what does that mean? That means he's very powerfully aware of the presence of God in his life. Right? Okay. That's pretty good. That's not so easy. Right? If he were that aware all the time, even though the awareness is relative to something that we might think is negative, okay, but it's not so negative. I mean, I understand. If he's as aware of God's presence in his life as he is of the cop on the side of the highway with the speed gun, so he's got a pretty high sensitivity to godliness in his life. Most people don't achieve that level of sensitivity to the presence of God in their life. That's pretty real. But that's still Yira Tata. That's still the lowest level. Yira Sa'inish. He's afraid of the punishment. But even afraid of the punishment means the person has reached a state of Yira, which is the same as Re'iyah. He sees God in his midst. He's afraid of him. Okay, Beseder. You could also probably love him. That'd be better. But Yira is just fine. Reishi Safedi Vikara Vishashi. You say it every day before davening. If you don't, okay, there's such a minhag to say the beginning of the 41st chapter of Tanya every day before davening. And what does it talk about? The centrality and the necessity of Yiras Hashem, to be sensitive to God in our midst. Yira Miloshin Re'iyah, to see Him. He's here, and He's watching what we do. That's real. That's not fake. Oh no, that's Mussar. That's not Chassidus. No, that's Torah. That's truth. It's nothing to do with Mussar and Chassidus. 41st chapter of Tanya says that even though Ava is greater than Yira, without Yira, nothing works. Right? Okay. The Alter Rebbe says, the Alter Rebbe is pretty Chassidish here. Don't worry. I mean, there are people who are, more Chassidish than the Alter Rebbe and got to Lubavitch before the Alter Rebbe, but I mean, don't worry about those people. Right? Okay. He knows what he's talking about, the Alter Rebbe. So, Teshuvah miyira, what does it do? Chazal say it transforms the wrongdoing, the willful wrongdoing, into something that was done without complete understanding or will. The official lashon is takes the zadain and turns it into a shkaga. Doing something b'shaygeg is doing something not by accident, doing something unaware of the full effect of this act. Meaning, someone who's over Shabbos b'shaygeg, he doesn't know today is Shabbos, he doesn't know this act is Asur on Shabbos, right? That's obviously different than someone who says, yes, I know it's Asur, and I know exactly what malacha I'm doing, etc., but I'm going to do it anyway. That's called mezi. That's pretty serious. And that person, I mean, in the old days, was put to death in Beis Din. Probably never happened, but that person would be put to death in Beis Din. Shkaga, shegeg, you bring a korban chatas. The person didn't know today was Shabbos. He got for tumult, or the person didn't know that this action is one of the 39 malachas. Right? Okay. Then someone tells him, so, oh, didn't know. So he brings a korban chatas, brings a sin offering. So turning a zodan into a shkaga is a pretty good thing. That's an amazing thing. Turning something that was done willfully into something that was done, so to speak, by mistake. That's tshuva miyira. Tshuva miyava transforms the negative into positive. Simple pshat. Now the Rebbe here is talking about kapara, but simple pshat in tshuva, what does that mean? Well, what often is it that is giving you the energy and the focus to make such a powerful statement as the tshuva that you want to make? Might be that the dark place you put yourself in is dafka the reason that you have such energy to emerge from that dark place and reconnect to light. So it might very well be that if you're doing tshuva mi'ava, if you're doing tshuva mi'ava, so then retroactively that aveira becomes a mitzvah. Because if it weren't for that aveira, you wouldn't have. That doesn't mean you do aveiras. You don't do aveiras. Echte ve'ashuv doesn't work. I'll do an aveira, then I'll do tshuva because that's better. No, that's not better. That's a disaster. Because then the only reason you're doing the aveira is because there's something called tshuva. So the Eibishter takes away that tshuva. I know you can't do tshuva for that. You can even for that, but basically no. Right? Why? Because the only reason I'm doing the aveira is because I know that I can do tshuva for the aveira. No, you can't. So don't do the aveira. Okay. But that being said, a person who does an aveira and then realizes the place he's put himself in and reconnects more powerfully than before to his source because he's so distraught spiritually by where he put himself, by doing that with the right intention, because of his love for Kadosh Baruch Hu, he ultimately elevates that act in the past to a level of schus, merit. It's quite astounding. And that's what's so astounding about tshuva. Most people relate to tshuva as the future. Tshuva definitely affects the future. There's no question about that. But because this nature of a yid is you have a nefesh elokis, and mitzad the nefesh elokis, you're beyond time, you can also affect the past. You don't just affect the future, you also affect your past, which is really quite astounding. I was going to talk about how we can affect our past and how not. I mean, what will work and what won't work. It can affect our past by doing tshuva and elevate negative stuff in the past to a higher level, to a level of a mitzvah. Right? Because that might be what's giving me such energy to reconnect to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Right? And you look around here sometimes, right? People who have come from places that are interesting places for a Jew to be, right? Okay, and they have unbelievable energy to reconnect to something that they found a little later in life, or as the Rebbe generally refer to what the world calls Balei Teshuvah, the Rebbe refers to them as late beginners. They began a little late, okay, so they have unbelievable energy to catch up, so to speak. And at the end of the year, what do most of the shluchim say when they're asked to talk at some point at the end of the year? I learned more from these guys than I learned in all my years in yeshiva, because I never saw anybody so excited about Yiddishkeit. Everybody else I was living with sort of took it for granted. Just sort of what you do. And why they had to see some people who didn't take it for granted. Why don't they take it for granted? Because it was hidden from them for 20 years of their life, and they finally discovered, and they go, wow, why didn't someone tell me about this before? Right? This is amazing. Okay. Right? B'diuk. So that energy of the so-called Baal Tshuva is really a very, very, very powerful thing. It's an amazing thing. And it has a certain advantage. Does that mean that we bring up our kids in Harlem so that they can all become Balei Tshuva? No, bad idea. Don't do that. Right? Do not. This is parenthetical, but it's very important. Right? And you're going to see this because the Rebbe is going to say what real tshuva is. Your children do not have to know about all the goyish idiocy that you grew up with. They don't have to know about that stuff. They don't have to have heard of rock and roll bands. They don't have to have heard of television programs. They don't have to have heard of novels. Don't tell them. You're not hiding anything. It's just they don't have to know about that. Why? Because they'll be pure. if they don't know about it, because you know that it holds you back. That shtus in our heads holds us back. We know that. Okay, so don't give it to your kids. Your kids don't need that shtus. They've got their own issues that they're going to have to deal with. The frum kid has issues he has to deal with. He has a Yetzer Hara just like everybody else. You don't have to give him all the goyish stuff that you grew up with. I mean, what does he need that for? Why are you doing? Don't you like this kid? So you don't have to give it to him. Oh, yeah, wait, it's very important. I want you to understand how cricket works. No, he doesn't have to understand how cricket works. You know what? If he grows up in England, he's probably going to figure it out anyway because he has a Yetzer Hara and it's going to be interested in how come everybody's into this thing called cricket, right? And you go, cricket? Well, everybody else goes baseball. So don't, it's all right. That's the way it is. The doc's not here, right? So, right? And Americans say that, if God didn't want you to use your hands, he wouldn't have given you any. This game that doesn't let you touch it with your hands, what a dumb game. That's what Americans say. I didn't say they're right. I didn't say they're right. I just said that's what they say. Right? Okay. Right? So they don't have to know about all that stuff. Right? They're going to find out about it anyway, right? But some of the stuff, then they don't have to find out about. Right? The rock and roll band that you like, they don't have to find out about. You don't have to play that music for them. It's not good for them. It's bad for the soul. Don't do that to their soul. It happened to your soul. That's not your fault. Don't do that to them. They don't need that. It's not healthy. It's just not healthy stuff. No. You're not going to feed them non-kosher food, God forbid. Here, I want you to taste crab, just so you'll know what it is. Right? No. Well, don't give them unhealthy music either. Not kosher music. Why do that? Okay. But real tshuva takes us to a place higher than the place that we started, which is really quite astounding. Okay, so the Rebbe's going to explain that. Tzarich lahavin. To understand this. Now the Rebbe says something absolutely astounding. And this is so relevant to, it's relevant to every Jew, obviously, but it's especially relevant to that creature called the Baal Tshuva. Tzarich lahavin. Kisha'adam eisa tshuva. When a person does tshuva, and what's the first aspect of tshuva? There are three. The Rambam says there's three aspects of tshuva. Charata, remorse, not depression, remorse. We'll see what that means. Vidui, confession, meaning I admit that which really vidui comes first. I admit that I did something wrong. I'm aware of the fact that this behavior was improper. Right? And I actually say that vocally. That's what we're going to be doing a lot of on Yom Kippur. Right? Charata, remorse for that act, and the Rebbe is going to describe what remorse is, really amazing description of it. And Kabbalah la'asid, and acceptance for the future. I mean, not only am I unhappy that I, whatever word you want to use, I'm sorry that I did that thing, but I also am making some sort of resolution to the fact that I won't continue with that behavior. Okay? Kishadam eisa tshuva umischaret, the Rebbe uses that word, mischaret, has remorse. Alachet sha'asa. So now look what the Rebbe says. This is so amazing. What's true remorse? Oikerhu, he uproots bekach. Through this remorse, es hatainug shahayaloi be'es asiyas ha'avera. The pleasure that there was to him at the time that he did the avera. Keep reading, and then we'll come back to that. As a result of this, misnake, he's cleansed. The Rebbe's talking about tshuva, not Yom Kippur, just tshuva. Misnake is cleansed, unvenimchak mimena, and it's erased hara, the negative reality of that avera. Wow. So what's charata? Charata, the Rebbe says, is I no longer get pleasure from that avera. That's real charata. Not just I'm not going to go there anymore. I don't get pleasure from the fact that I did. What does that mean? What's very common? And this isn't picking on anybody. This is just reality, and it's an important reality to understand, and it's an important thing to know where we have to go. What's very common in a yeshiva like this one? What might happen in the dorms or at lunch now and then? guys talk about certain aveiras they might have done in college, and it was unbelievable. We got so blasted, and then we went to this concert, and it happened to be Friday night, and it happened to be music that is just a disaster for your soul. But what he's going to talk, it was unbelievable. What, you saw so-and-so in concert? Wow, unbelievable, incredible, wow, amazing. At that moment, what's happening? What's he getting pleasure from? That aveira. Not that he got pleasure from that aveira 4 years ago. He's getting pleasure from that aveira at lunch in Mayanot. That's not harata. That doesn't mean he's a bad guy and a horrible guy and we should throw him off the roof. Right? But that person has to realize, wait a minute, relative to that aveira, I'm still living that aveira. I'm getting as much pleasure from here. The only reason we do, obviously we do aveiras because it gives us pleasure, right? We don't do aveiras because it's painful. I mean, that maybe some people do, but that's weird, right? The reason we do things is we get some pleasure from it. Okay, so I'm still getting pleasure from that rock and roll concert. And I don't want to say that I might even also mention who was standing next to me and how good looking she was. And her last name wasn't Goldstein. Right? That actually might have been, because her father was Jewish, but her mother wasn't. Now everybody who runs, it's the Lubavitchers who run schools for kids in America have a real problem, because the kids who come with the name Goldberg, they're not Jewish, and the kids who come with the name McCormick and Smith are, right? Because the father is McCormick and the mother is Goldschmidt, except that when the father's Goldschmidt and the mother is McCormick, so that's a problem. The other way around, it's not a so they have a real problem, the Lubavitchers are running these schools. Okay. So the Rebbe says an amazing thing about that charata. What's that? A lobotomy? It's not a lobotomy. It's not denying my past. But it's coming to realization there's certain things that are not worthy of getting pleasure from anymore. Why did I get pleasure from it then? I don't understand. Why would I not get pleasure from it then? Because I didn't know any better, and I figured this is what you do, and that's what everybody does, and it seemed like a good time, and it was a good time. Okay. But now, and that's what we're talking about with your kids, that's why you don't share it with your kids. Why? I don't understand. You're going to share with your kids the time that when you were eating a burger, kosher burger, someone, there were rotten tomatoes in the burger and you threw up for 3 days. Oh, what fun. Let me tell you about it. Something happened to me in my past. It was so much fun. No, you don't have to know about that. You were sick to your stomach for 3 days because you ate some food that was rotten? Okay. So spiritually, I don't have to know about that. Again, are they going to know where you came from? Yes. Do you hide it? No, of course not. Right? They'll be very proud of it in the end.
If they ask you like what you've done as
it's none of your business. Right? So it's their business, what you did. And they're probably not going to. Why? Because they're going to be holy little kids who are busy in their own little thing, and they're not interested in finding out whether they're not going to know. Tati, did you ever see the Rolling Stones? I heard they're playing a concert and they're 130 years old. Right? He's not going to know what that is to ask, hopefully. Right? So, right? I mean, and it's not, and it's also the idea of, well, I did that, but it's not for you. Obviously, things come up in conversation, right? Fine. But I'm talking about a priori. Is this something, like a friend? Well, you know him, Rabbi Wisniewski. I think a lot of you know him. So he writes in English, and he loves a good English. He likes reading things in English that are good, and he likes a good read, right? And in the bathroom here, there's all sorts of things you can read that you're not going to waste your time out of the bathroom, but in the bathroom you can get all sorts of interesting reading done and if you like English, so there's lots of stuff that's written in proper English, right? So one of the things that was written in very, very good English, and it's really a good read, was the Harry Potter series. Right? She writes well, that lady. I mean, she really does. I mean, she got a whole generation of Americans to read books. They actually started, there were sociological studies of how many more kids are reading books because of those books. She did a great thing. She got Americans to read, right? Because there was a time when they weren't reading, computers and televisions. Okay. They started reading her books. Amazing. Okay. So it's a good read. So I read them in the bathroom. Mm-hmm. So I asked Moshe, did you ever, kids, I know he loves it, he writes beautifully, and he just likes reading good English. I said, did you ever read it? He said, no. So why not? He said, when my kids grow up and leave the house, I'll buy it and I'll read it. He didn't want it around the house when his kids were around. They don't have to see Harry Potter. He said, he grew up, it's the way he grew up in L.A., etc., and he appreciates English, and he's a writer in English, and it would be interesting, that would be something he'd find interesting to read in the bathroom. He has to put that in his kid's head to read in the bathroom? What for? Right? Let his kids read science books in the bathroom. Right? In Rebbe Simchana's house, what did the kids do in the bathroom?
Learning languages?
Yeah, they learned languages. They had competitions learning languages and dictionaries. The 3 boys were all geniuses, right? And they were learning language. They take a dictionary. Evidently, they would learn a language in 3 weeks. That's what they say. They would take a dictionary into the bathroom, but not with a how-to book, a dictionary. They'd just try to figure, they'd have to work out the grammar and get it all together. They'd take a dictionary, and they would memorize dictionaries and learn languages. Right? Rabbi Gruner once told me that no one walked by the Rebbe and talked to the Rebbe in a language where the Rebbe wasn't able to answer him in that language. Right? Even Hungarian. Right? I don't know. Is there a Hungarian dictionary?
No, there was actually, the Rebbe said to someone, I don't speak Hungarian.
The Rebbe said, I don't speak Hungarian?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, okay.
There's a video about it.
Wow, that's amazing. Because the Rebbe spoke as a kid. And that wasn't something Rebbe-like. It was just as a kid, that's what they did. I guess there wasn't a Hungarian-Russian dictionary in those days. Right? But right, so what the Rebbe just said something extremely important about Teshuvah. What's Teshuvah? The first thing is uprooting the tainug that I get from the Aveira. A mushal for such a thing, and I'm sorry for the crass mushal, but this is the mushal Chazal bring, so I can, if it's good enough for Chazal, it's good enough for me. The adulterous husband who makes a decision to stop being adulterous, but sits now and then and experiences great pleasure from this illicit affair and this illicit affair and this illicit affair and this illicit affair, and says, oh, I'm so happy I experienced all those affairs at the beginning of my marriage, but I don't do that anymore. What do you say about that guy? You want him to marry your sister? You want him to marry your daughter? Or are you going to break his neck? Well, that's what we do with God. Oh, I'm so happy I experienced A, B, C, D, and E before I got through. All these illicit affairs I had with Eilam Hazeh before I got married to God, and actually I was already a Jew, right? It's not like I wasn't Jewish. I just didn't know I was married to God yet, right? That's Teshuvah. Is that something that's going to happen in a week? No. In 6 months? No. In a year? No. But is there something that a person has to realize that's what life is about? Yes. That's real Teshuvah, right? Teshuvah means I'm returning to the Eibishter, not that I've accepted upon myself a certain mode of behavior that's better for me because it makes my life better. That's great, that's amazing, that's terrific. It's incredible. But Lav Dafka, it's Teshuvah. Teshuvah is I'm coming close to the Eibishter. Is that hard? Yeah, sure. It's not something so simple and so easily done. Okay. Lashuv el Hashem, to return to the Eibishter. And that's where Charata comes from. The what do they call it? The something erring, something, the husband who, philanderer, is he a philanderer? What is he? I don't know, whatever. The unfaithful husband. So what? He stopped. Baruch Hashem, he stopped. Good for him. Well done. Right? But if he still talks, when he goes when he sits with his buddies in the club, and he sits and talks about this affair and that affair, I don't do it anymore, but oh wow, my God, I really enjoyed that. I went on a business trip and I took my secretary and rah, 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 rah. Oh, still a lowlife. That guy is still a lowlife. When will he reach a state where we think that he's really someone who's reconnected to his wife in a serious way? When those things really don't give him any pleasure at all. Might give him the opposite of pleasure, but he doesn't have to dwell on that either. But they don't give him pleasure. Doesn't boast about it. That takes time. It's not going to happen the first day he makes a decision, you know what, that's it, I'm done. I'm going to be a proper husband. Good for him, kol hakavod. That's an incredible thing. Is he finished the job? No, he hasn't finished the job. He's finished one job. He's now starting another one. He's come to the realization that that's improper behavior, but now he's got to work on uprooting that from himself, and that'll take a while. Okay. And every now and then in your life, things will pop into your head, and you go, where in the world did that come from? Gosh, I don't remember that. I mean, now you do. Haven't thought about it, it depends how old you are. Something you did when you were 16 will pop into your head, and you go, oh my gosh, where did that come from? So now if you're 21, that's not so long ago. If you're 55, you'll go, where did that come from? I haven't thought of that for 35 years. Where did that come from? Where did that come from? The Abishter is doing you a favor. He's putting it in your head so you can go, fat, go away. Oh, you just did Teshuvah for that thing. You just cleansed it. You didn't even remember it. The Abishter just gave you an opportunity to do Teshuvah for that thing. Fix it. It's very kind of him. Yeah, I'd rather not have those things pop in your head. Okay, but say that they're going to pop into your head. It's real life. It's unbelievable what the Rebbe says here. The pleasure. How does he uproot the pleasure? He had pleasure. You say, pretend he didn't have pleasure? No, he did have pleasure, but he doesn't anymore. The fact that he did that is not something that gives him pleasure. Adarabah. Might even give him pain, but he has to focus on the pain. He doesn't focus on that. A lack of pleasure. The Rebbe doesn't say it pains him. And by virtue of no longer receiving pleasure from that, what happens? He erases that from his past. It's unbelievable. That's such an incredible thing. These previous Avedas, Hein Shevir, say, Lidate Simoyon LaKadosh Baruch Hu. Since these previous events, that's what brought him to this great thirst for Kadosh Baruch Hu. L'kachein nechshavim l'zochiyos. So therefore, I get how they're called merits. That's what Rabbi says about Teshuvah. Now let's just finish the paragraph very, very quickly. Aval. Now the Rebbe's going to ask the question, which will begin the answer of tomorrow. Tonight's Farbrengen is not going to go late. There'll be Chassidus tomorrow, okay? 12:30 latest. We're going to sit for a couple hours, and okay, it's the beginning of a week. It's an important week. It's not a week to be tired all week. There's a rather important day at the end of the week that you need a little energy for. It's called Yom Kippur, a rather important day, right? Aval, Keitzad, how can it be, the Rebbe asked, Misnake v'nimcha kara, that it's cleansed and erased the negative reality sheba'adam, that's in a person, al yedei tzuma shayim, the fact that I went through a 26-hour period called Yom Kippur, mi bli shadam yaseh tshuva, and according to Rebbe, even if I don't do tshuva, I understand. The Rebbe said an amazing thing. I understand how tshuva brings about cleansing, because what's no longer there? What caused me to do the Avera? The pleasure I got from it. Okay, what's no longer there? That pleasure. So I see how that's been uprooted from me. And that'll take a while. That's an amazing thing. That's a real accomplishment. Okay. But how is it, the Rebbe says, by living through 26 hours, I uproot the Avera? I don't get it. Right? Teshuvah makes perfect sense. I uproot the source of the Avera, which was the tainug I got from it, the pleasure. If I didn't get pleasure from it, I wouldn't do it. Someone who doesn't like rock and roll doesn't go to rock and roll concerts. Right? That's pretty clear. Someone who doesn't like the taste of liquor doesn't drink liquor. Okay. Someone who doesn't like the feeling they get after they do drugs doesn't do drugs. And why would they do that? They don't like it. Doesn't give them pleasure. Okay, so they're not going to do it. Say that makes sense. Okay, so I no longer get the pleasure. It did give me pleasure. I no longer get the pleasure. I realize I've uprooted that from me. Amazing. That's real. That's an incredible thing. How does Yom Kippur do that? That's what the Rebbe's asking. I lived through 26 hours of Yom Kippur. According to Rebbe, I don't even have to do what we just described relative to distancing myself from the pleasure of it. But even according to the Chachamim, Yom Kippur itself brings it about. Keitzad misnake v'nimcha kara shebadam ha'yidei tzuma shayim. Mibli shadam yaseh tshuva. Efshar la'avin. It's possible to understand. Possible. She'itzuma shayim. that the essence of the day, yeh kapara, that it'll bring about a state of kapara atonement, lebal yanishu, that he won't get punished. It'll be a day of general clemency. Okay, that I understand. That God can decide, okay, he's not going to get punished. Mishum Yom Kippur meisir es ha'onish ala averos, because Yom Kippur removes the punishment for averos. That makes sense. God can decide that's a good idea. But how and through what? Yordim hapagomim shebenefesh adam. How is it that the blemishes that exist on our soul by virtue of certain activity that we did that was bad for our soul? I mean, to put this in physicality, a cigarette smoker stops smoking cigarettes. Say that. When he smokes cigarettes, his lungs are black. They look like a furnace. Right? My wife, one of the first operations my wife was ever in as a medical student, was a heavy cigarette smoker. What do the students do in the operation so that they can sit in the room? It's pretty gross, but this is what they do. They hold the clamps, right? When they open someone up, so they have to pull back everything so they can get in. It's really a little gruesome, right? That's what they do, right? They, cut, open them up. There's something they have to do in there. So they have to have people holding the clamps. They clamp and they open them up. So there's room for the doctor. So there have to be people holding that, standing there. So who does that? You don't need a surgeon who studied 10 years of surgery to do that. You need a student who just holds there. That's how the students get in to watch. So my wife, the first operation she ever watched, she's holding the clamps, and they open up this guy, and he was a heavy cigarette smoker. She said it looked like a furnace in there. It was all black. She said, she's like, wow, it's all black and sooty. It was disgusting. I said, whoa, okay, now that guy, if he doesn't smoke for the next 10 years, what's he going to look like? Just like you. His lungs will be pink. Everything will be pink, just like it was, right, before he started smoking. Right? That's what happens. Okay. So that's how Teshuvah would work, right? I stop doing what I'm doing, and so the effect of that will disappear. I get that. What if there were a day that every cigarette smoker lived through and his lungs went from black to pink? How's that work? That doesn't make any sense. That's Yom Kippur in Ruchnius, right? In Gashmias, you walk through this, you walk through a 24, 25, 26 hour period, and all of a sudden, poof, every disease you ever had is gone. Wow, that would be cool. How's that work? Yeah, someone has, heart disease, and they start exercising properly under guidance, etc., etc. What can they do? They can end up with a relatively healthy heart at the end of it. They're going to still have to be more careful than other people, but they can mamish bring about incredible health from a state of lack of health. How? Work, Teshuvah, right? In Gashmias. So too in Ruchnias. How's Yom Kippur work? The Rebbe asks. How's that work? What kind of machine is this? Kamur, Hari Gam Ladas Rabbanan, as we said earlier, also according to the position of the Rabbanan, Hasevrim, when they opine, Shenidreshes Teshuvah, the Teshuvah is required, Hari a Kapara Shel Yom Kippur. The Kapara of Yom Kippur Gedola is greater Mipulas Teshuvah Shasa Adam. Than the pool of Teshuvah, the action of Teshuvah that a person did. We saw that. Ubefrat, and particularly the Rebbe says Ladas Rebbe. Definitely, according to the position of Rebbe, Yom Kippur Mechaper Gam L'Loichu. How does Yom Kippur bring about this state of cleanliness? If, according to Rebbe, I didn't necessarily even do anything. I kept Yom Kippur, for sure. I fasted and davened, etc. But real Teshuvah, love davening. And according to the Chachamim, even I did real Teshuvah. But how is it that Yom Kippur brings about a level of cleansing beyond the Teshuvah that I do? How does that work? That's our question. How in the world does Yom Kippur work? Okay. We'll probably talk about this in the Farbrengen tonight, just to be sure that you understand this. If what the Rebbe taught us today might depress you, God forbid. Don't let it depress you, first of all. That's just your Yetzer Hara. Right, which is heavy into depression because that's its most powerful weapon. Right? But so this explains what's the most joyous day of the year for the Eibishter. Yom Kippur, because the Yidden are cleansed and the Yidden come back. That which gives the Eibishter more pleasure than anything else is Teshuvah. That's what the books tell us. Okay. Fine. So, might there still be work to do? There's always work to do, my goodness. Right? But what we talked about in terms of your children and what we talked about in terms of the pleasure, so they're one and the same thing. Right? If I no longer get pleasure from that thing, I'm not going to want to inflict it on my children. And it's important. The children don't have to. I remember when my in-laws moved to Eretz Yisrael, so they had a video machine. They had a television with a video machine, and they watched old movies. You know, Mary Poppins, Sound of Music, things that were relatively innocuous, right? So my wife and I had this discussion: are we going to let the kids go and watch movies with their grandparents? You know, not My Fair Lady, right? So we let them watch some movies. We're very picky as to which ones, but okay, certain kids movies. Mary Poppins was a kids movie, but they watched the movie. Yes, we let them watch. I remember walking to shul with my 16-year-old son. He's no longer 16. His daughter is 16. 16-year-old son, and he said something that Pasha tore my heart out. I understand why we did it, but why we allowed it. But he said, why did you let me watch those movies in Sabba's house? That shtus is still in my head.
Right.
Whoa, my mom just wanted to die on the spot. Like, what about, It's innocuous, Mary Poppins, right? They were to sit with their grandparents. But we made a mistake. Made a mistake. Should have told the grandparents, you know what? They're not going to watch the movies. That's what he said to me when he was 16 years old. A serious kid in yeshiva wants to be a Chassidus yid. And 16, they're like, if they're into it, they're on fire. If they're not into it, they're in left field. If they're into it, they're pushed on fire, right? Yeshiva Ketana, they're off the wall, these kids. They go to Yeshiva Ketana, they like mellow out. Yeshiva Ketana, our sons, I remember, they used to say 45-minute Kriya Shema Shalamita. They'd sit there for 45 minutes. And then they got to Yeshiva Gedela, and I noticed that it was shorter. I said, what's with your Kriya Shema Shalamita? She said, oh, come on now, but you think it was real? I'm saying it for 45 minutes? I'm looking at the watch. How long am I saying it? Now I got a little more real. I'm 17 years old. I'm like trying to make this real. But Baruch Hashem, they had to go through that point where it was, not real, but it all worked out. They were explaining to their father, who didn't go to Yeshiva Ketana or Yeshiva Gedela, they were explaining to him how it works, right? So it was very interesting for me. Right? There's certain thing that the so-called Baal Tshuva, there's certain experiences your kid is going to have in yeshiva that you didn't go through, so you're going to be limited in how you can help him navigate that. You can help him navigate it within the context of basic common sense. But certain particular things, you have to talk to someone who went through, right? You go to your mashpia who went through that and say, wait, you did this thing in yeshiva, what's that about? Yeah, don't worry about it. It's everybody. It's the way it is. Don't worry about it. It's okay. Okay. 45-minute Kriya Shema Shalamita. I'd say good night, right? And they're like sitting at the table. They're sitters saying Kriya Shema. Little mushrooms, like these little guys with the hats. They look like little mushrooms, They're saying Kriya Shema, it's so cute. Right? Okay, they're on fire. But he said that. I said, whoa. He's right, not me. Right? He's a Chassidus yid, Baruch Hashem. He's a very Chassidus yid. Do his kids know what Mary Poppins is? No. Do they know what Uncle Moshe and the Mitzvah Men are? Yeah. No, that's good stuff. That's amazing stuff. And what's the one that's even better? What's the Midas machine? Marvelous Midas machine. That's even better. Right. Best music out there. Puts Avram Fried to shame. That kid, same kid, used to have the Marvelous Midas machine, just the music on a tape that he had, and he used to listen. Oh gosh. Our older kids were little. We have like two naglot, older and younger. So the older ones, my daughter's birthday was yesterday. She's 43. So when she was a kid, it was out there. Marvelous Midas came a little after Uncle Moshe. Same people, generally. Uncle Moshe was Zale Newman. Remind me to tell you an amazing Zale Newman story tonight in the Fulbright. Zale Newman was Uncle Moshe. Toronto. This all happened in basements in Toronto, which is really astounding because Toronto is sort of the most boring place in all of humanity. No, there's places in Canada that have a little life. Toronto is like, they didn't put color in Toronto until about 1976. The rest of the world had it in the 50s, and Toronto got it in the mid-70s. And these guys were sitting in basements in Toronto creating this unbelievable music for Jewish kids. Amazing stuff. It's really good stuff. Kids loved it. It was healthy and whole, and it was just good stuff. Zell Newman and Moshe Yes, Oliver Sholem. He was marvelous Midas. He wrote a lot of this stuff.
The producer for the music is famous.
Suki and Din. I don't know who those two guys are.
Really?
Yeah.
That's for Uncle Maishi.
And I think also
Morris Minshim is a very good singer.
A.B. Rottenberg, right. So
He's great.
Right, so he was one of the guys in the.
His music is fantastic.
Right, so he's one of the guys in there.
Thank you, Rabbi.
A pleasure. What are you doing these days?
I'm still living here.
Don't do the live stream.
I just finished school.
It's not live. I don't think anything happened.
I just graduated.
What?
Hebrew.
Oh, you're fair.
Thank God. I work. And I miss Mayanot sometimes, so I come to see Yosef.
Where you live?